Hello, I'm Mike Ryan, and welcome to BNAP Today. Just around the corner, and a posh corner at that, Todd Johnson from the Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce. In these turbulent times, communities big and small need strong representation and a strong community spirit. The Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce has been the voice of business in Beverly Hills since 1923 and has more than 800 local businesses as members. Todd Johnson is CEO and President. And Todd, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us the role your chamber has played during the pandemic.
Well, it's been a vital role. We work closely with the city throughout the year anyway, and this year it's obviously been that much more because of this pandemic. We have close to 800 members. Our biggest role is probably communicating to everyone and getting the word out, because it changes, as you know, just about hourly, it seems. So we're continually getting information out to members, both from the city and then also from the county and from the state of California. Today they had a big announcement because they've decided to pull back on eating in restaurants, and they've taken that away, and now you're only able to eat outside and dine outside or take out food. So our role has been simply communication, but also advocacy. There's been a lot of laws that the state and some people are trying to get through, kind of under the radar, so to speak, that is pretty bad for business. So we certainly monitor that and are big advocates for the business community in that aspect as well.
Do you think the governments, local, state and federal, are doing enough?
Oh, well, I think the challenge is who do you believe? Which source of information do you listen to? And that starts all the way up at the federal, out of the White House, all the way down to local government. I think it's been extremely interesting. Let's put it that way. I think in some ways that they've done an awful lot, but I think in other ways, in hindsight, we probably should have done things differently. But when dealing with a pandemic on this size, you have 40 million people in California. That's bigger than a lot of countries. So that's a big task to take on. I wouldn't want the mayor or the governor's job by any means.
Now, Beverly Hills is a very swisho area, as they would say, in the backwaters of the rest of the world. What are the businesses or what sectors have been, say, affected most by COVID-19 and all these restrictions and the topsying and the turving of governments, including local and state?
Yeah. Well, I think of all the industries, virtually there's only a couple industries that weren't hurt too much in this, and it's obviously, I think, the banking industry, the banking world hasn't taken too big of a hit. But Beverly Hills is known for luxury and for a lot of visitors. A lot of people come from out of state and out of the country. So tourism is taking a monster hit. Our hotels, normally we have 18 hotels that all run in the 90 plus percentile of occupancy year round. So we're full most of the time, and they've all been down in single digit occupancies since since March, middle of March to April. And that's a big hit on everyone. The economy, as far as a TOT tax, was a transient occupancy tax. The city doesn't have that money coming in because the hotels aren't bringing that in. The local restaurants are not getting the people coming in, or the shoppers, right? Rodeo Drive. The hotels themselves are taking monster hits. So that industry is really taking a big hit, and it's going to take quite some time to come back.
Whether you're in Beverly Hills, New York, Salinas in California, Hong Kong, anywhere in the world, same question can be asked, but I haven't yet found someone with the answer. What do you do to get through the next 6, 12, 18 months at least? Yeah.
Well, I think, some of that depends on how bad this comes back. We were anticipating a second round of this, but more in the, in the fall or even in the winter. And here it is July, and California's got an uprise on this. And it seems to be because of Memorial Day weekend. A lot of people went out Memorial Day weekend. Between Memorial Day and all the protests with Mr. Floyd, who died, I think there was a lot of spreading of it then, and we're seeing the uprise in that now. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take. I think you're right in the aspect it's going to be a year or two before we get back to any kind of normalcy. Probably close to 3 years before we get back to the numbers that we were the first quarter of this year, January and February.
What can your chamber do, or what can basically any chamber do to help your members or their members?
Well, my chamber, we do over 200 events a year. Yeah, we have some events that we have 700 to 800 people come. So I asked my staff, I said, we're going to have to think outside the box. And so within about 60 days, we put together a virtual campaign called Back to Business campaign. And we actually had the event yesterday. So it's all online. It's, and I'll be very quick because we ended up having close to 300 people.
Wow.
Get involved with it. And we had over 65 well-known upper echelon in their industries talking about, well, what's the luxury real estate world now after this, or what is the hotel business? What's the restaurant business? What's the retailers? All the folks on Rodeo Drive. I mean, how have they had to change their business in order to do it? And I think everywhere in the world, but certainly what we're striving for here in Beverly Hills is getting people's trust back. Because people are going to be very cautious on going out to restaurants, going out to a theater or to a gym or anything, because they're unsure of this. This is it's a scary disease. It has a nasty outcome to it. And I think until we get a virus or until we get a vaccine, it's going to continue to be, people are going to be very cautious, and that's hurting economics hugely. The airline business, and who flies, who doesn't fly, and so this has been pretty devastating, as I'm sure you can attest to in your country as well.
Just very concerning. Do we, for those that go for a walk, of course, with your face mask, down Rodeo Drive, can you still see plenty of Maseratis, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, rollers?
Yeah, they are. You don't see as much.
No,
To be
because they're
honest.
resting, you see, they're resting, and they're at
Well,
that particular age.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a certain client that comes to Beverly Hills. They actually fly here with those cars. We still have the luxury cars around. Rodeo Drive is fully open and recovered from the protests that we had about a month ago. So we're back on track, and you still see, you come here, it still is luxury. I think the brand, the name Beverly Hills is probably one of the strongest names in the world as far as luxury and recognizing, everyone knows the name Beverly Hills, and that's one of our strengths.
Lovely part of the world, some fabulous businesses there too. If somebody wants to find out more about the Chamber, how do they do that, Todd?
Our website is stocked full of all kinds of information, but it's just www.beverlyhillschamber.com. And you can go on there and virtually find just about anything you need, whether it be a certain kind of business you're looking for, if you want to open businesses. We do outreach trips every year, mostly to New York City, go to San Francisco, and we meet with businesses. And businesses that have either contacted us that want to come to Beverly Hills, or businesses that are unique that we have found that we think that should be here in Beverly Hills, or certainly many of the headquarters of the big shopping businesses in Beverly Hills are in New York, either New York or London more often. So, but we're actually talking with 4 different businesses from New York that want to come to Beverly Hills. There are companies that have the vision, and they also probably have the capital, obviously, to be able to expand when things like this happen, because we are going to have definitely space available. There's going to be vacancies, and I think there'll be some pretty good deals around from our landlords for spaces that maybe wouldn't have been the case 90 days ago.
No. Now, the other question is, would my Pinto fit in the up and down Rodeo Drive? Would it mix with the Maseratis and the Ferraris, or do I have to keep my Pinto in the garage?
Well, you have my permission to drive it down, because it's, you never know who's behind the wheel and what they have, right? You can't judge someone by their cover, so that's for sure.
But I won't drive it during hard rubbish day, of course, because they might take that away along with me in it. Look, Todd, great chatting. Great talking with you, Todd. It's a terrible time for everybody globally. Nobody really knows when we're getting out of it, how we'll get out of it, and whether the cure is going to be worse than the disease. Todd, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Coming up next, some good news for the US. Good news stateside, as 4.8 million Americans were put back to work in June.
There was a record surge in hiring in June, with 4.8 million Americans rehired last month, according to data released Thursday by the Labor Department. June's number blew past expectations. The bulk of that surprise came from parts of the economy that were previously shut down, namely the rehiring of service industry jobs in restaurants and bars. But total employment is still nearly 15 million jobs below where it was before stay-at-home orders were put in place in March. The unemployment rate fell to 11.1% in June from 13.3% in May. But Black Americans weren't as fortunate. With Black unemployment at more than 15%, the gap between Black and white unemployment swelled to its largest in 5 years. With an eye on the total report, President Trump on Thursday came out to take a victory lap.
So it's 7.5 million jobs created in the last 2 months alone. Today's announcement proves that our economy is roaring back. It's coming back extremely strong. We have some areas where we're putting out the flames or the fires, and that's working out well. We're working very closely with governors, and I think it's working out very well.
But economists are worried June's jobs data may not paint an accurate picture of what's going on in the labor market, since states later in the month started to scale back or cancel reopening plans, which likely kicked off another round of layoffs at bars, restaurants, and other businesses relying on free-flowing consumer traffic. To further muddy the waters, a separate look at weekly unemployment claims released Thursday painted a less rosy picture. Roughly 1.43 million Americans filed for first-time jobless benefits last week, which was a bigger number than expected. All told, there were still 31.5 million Americans who received some sort of jobless benefits during the month of June, and that was before state reopening plans were scaled back.
Just how does the tourism sector get through this global unrest? The UN's Trade and Development body has warned the world's tourism sector could lose at least 1.2 trillion, and that could rise to 2.2 trillion if the break in international tourism lasts for 8 months. Peter Morrison is the international president of Skal International, one of the world's leading tourism bodies. Peter Morrison, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be on this live interview.
Okay. Now, the COVID-19, tourism, Skal, how has it affected the whole organisation? Because you primarily are involved with tourism.
We are. That's 100% of our members are all involved in tourism. We've got 14,300 worldwide, and they range from airlines, hotels, travel agents, what you name it. Anyone in tourism is entitled to be, car rentals, etc., etc. So 35% of our members are travel agents. So you can imagine what has happened to them with no one travelling around the world. And they've spent their last 3 months, 3 months, is refunding people's travel if they've still got a job. There's quite a number have lost their jobs, or in America they're on furlough, or in other places in the world they're on furlough, or they've taken early retirement, or they're still working and they're getting 60% of their pay. But it's been a terrible situation. We are trying to look after them as best we can as an organisation, and I just want to add now that this is the best time they can be a member of our organisation, because we can all work together, do business together around the world, and look after each other.
You're talking to various Skal organisations or chapters around the world. I mean, a lot's happening. What about throughout Asia? Not only do they have, especially in Hong Kong, COVID is still there. Tourism is a trickle, to say the least. But also they've got a lot of civil unrest, as with the US. How does your members, how do they cope with that? Because it's COVID is bad enough, but once the civil unrest hits, well, it becomes doubly worse, doesn't it?
It has, and the Hong Kong situation's been going on for over a year now. We still have a very strong club in Hong Kong, and they're coping, but they've had a double whammy really, with the unrest that started last year, now this, and more unrest, and the new laws that have just been brought in. It's been pretty tough for them.
What's the situation in New Zealand right now with hospitality and the tourism sectors?
Well, we you would have caught up that we're now on level 1, so we're basically operating back to normal. But the biggest things that is upsetting or pulling down tourism and hospitality is because of the border restrictions we still have. And because 70% of our tourism in New Zealand was our biggest industry. It overtook dairy industry a couple of years ago. And and there's billions of dollars of tourist dollars coming in. So at the moment, it's not happening. And so we're pushing for domestic tourism. But again, that is nowhere near the amount of money that the overseas tourists brought in. And of course, that affects hotels, it affects travel agents, but that goes right down the line not just to bars and restaurants, but it goes right down the line. I always say the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, because all those people supply restaurants, bars, hotels. They're all missing out. And the taxi driver's missing out. The petrol station that fills the taxi driver, taxi, is missing out. So, yes, it's right. It's great that we're back to level 1 and we can go out and we can socialise and there's no social distancing, and we've still got people arriving back, New Zealanders arriving back from overseas that are in isolation, and there's quite a number. There's something like 6,000 or 7,000 people in isolation in hotels.
That's enormous. That's just enormous.
Yeah. So that is happening, and those hotels are doing all right. But the rest of the hotels, there's a lot of them closed, not permanently. They've gone. What do they call it? I'm trying to think of the right term.
They're in hibernation.
Hibernation. That's the word.
There you are. It's been used a few times.
Yeah, and what is open is probably only running anything between 10 and 20%.
Wow, that's terrible.
And hotels as well, backpackers, Airbnb, all that. Even though as a hotelier, we don't really support Airbnb because they're not on a level playing field.
No.
But everyone is suffering.
If somebody wants to find out more about Skal, because I know that you have a delightful lunch with some fine New Zealand wine not far away, so we can't keep you from that. Yep. We must put our priorities right here. If somebody wants to find out more about Skal, how do they do that? Because it's a great organisation, and it's you're just worldwide, and you've got your finger on the pulse. It's if you're in tourism or related to a tourist business, I think you need to be a member.
Yeah, they do. They do definitely need. And in your country, there's 24 clubs spread right throughout Australia, and the quickest way to get on to find out where they are is to go onto the world website, which is www.skal.org.
Fantastic. Now,
so that's the best way to get on, and they will find clubs listed there in Australia. They'll find clubs all around the world, and that's the benefit, is that when we get back to travelling around the world, you'll be very welcome to attend a Skal lunch in Hong Kong, or a Skal lunch in New York, or a Skal dinner in London. No, that's what it's all about. And it's when you get there, you give some business cards out, and you actually end up doing business. Yep,
it's very prolific and great organisation. And I've been to a couple of their functions, and it becomes very salubrious partway through it.
Yeah, we certainly enjoy our food and wine. Yep.
Peter Morrison, International President of Skal International, thank you very much.
Thank you. All the best.
After the break, part 1 of a 2-part interview with Allan Zeman. Over the last 3 decades, the Lan Kwai Fong Group has established itself as a household name in Asia for entertainment, hospitality and lifestyles. Lan Kwai Fong Group is a great success story. Dr. Allan Zeman is known as Mr. Lan Kwai Fong for his role in developing one of the liveliest entertainment districts in Hong Kong. After starting his own business at the age of 19 and starting a successful trading company, he greatly expanded his portfolio of businesses in the 80s and 90s, many of which started in Lan Kwai Fong. As chairman of Lan Kwai Fong Holdings, he continues to influence various industries both in China and Asia, and is also an advisor to Chief Executive Carrie Lam. This is part one of a two-part interview. Part two is on Monday. Allan Zeman, this is a real pleasure.
It certainly is a pleasure to see you again.
You haven't changed. I was saying before off camera that you still look as young as ever, much younger than I feel.
Well, my secret is to count backwards. And so everybody else goes forward. I go backwards. So I'm getting younger.
Now, Allan, tell us about the great evolution. And great is used a lot, but really has been a fabulous evolution of Lan Kwai Fong and all of the main elements of its business today.
Well, Lan Kwai Fong basically started off as a nightlife area, catering to restaurants, bars. I started probably about 35 years ago. And when I was basically in another business in supply chain management, fashion business. And I slowly started to buy up the property in the area when property was very cheap and people didn't really know what I was doing. And I slowly became the largest landlord in the area. And as you well know, and everybody else, property in Hong Kong was definitely the right way to go because the values actually, went crazy over the years, and continues to escalate. And so Lan Kwai Fong today I've got many tenants. I've built new buildings. One of the main properties is California Tower, which is a real go-to place. It's a lifestyle building. Because of land being so expensive in Hong Kong, we go horizontal, vertical rather than horizontal, and because it's so expensive. And so we've got lifestyle buildings where you've got restaurants on upper floors, which maybe doesn't really work in many different cities, but because it's Hong Kong, it does work in Hong Kong. And because of it, the brand has become synonymous with entertainment, especially here in Asia. And we've also, about 10 years ago, had many calls. I constantly get calls to open up in other places, other countries. Everybody wants a Lan Kwai Fong. And so we opened up in Chengdu, in China, in the western part of China. And that is now about 10 years old and been very successful in the Chinese side. And we constantly are getting asked by different cities in China if they can have a Lan Kwai Fong. And because of that, we're looking at different areas, different places. Doing business in China is very good, but can be difficult with all the bureaucracy and that kind of things, not unlike many cities in the world. And so we're doing something called asset light, whereby we'll have partners who put up the money and we'll build it, design it, manage it for them. And you can expand much quicker that way. And that's basically in Lan Kwai Fong today is, we get offers all over from all over the world, but I prefer to stick here in Asia. We also have now gone to Phuket, to Thailand. Thailand's a very good market for tourism, and I own a hotel in Thailand, which is called Andara. We've got many Australian customers actually who do come.
Lock them out.
Well, they're actually fun. They actually add an element of fun to the to the hotel. Nice people, very carefree, loving, and rowdy can be sometimes, but they're good. They're a good group. And we then also are now doing a joint venture in Panga, in Phuket, across the bridge, which is 2.5 kilometers of beachfront. We're in the process of building a golf course, a huge golf course, right on the water. It's really amazing site, and we've got villas and condos, and we will have a hotel. We're in negotiation with one of the hoteliers to build a 5-star hotel there on the golf course. It looks magnificent, and so that's another big project that we're doing at the moment. So we're constantly looking at Lan Kwai Fong has expanded now to innovate, to design, build. We have in-house architects. We have in-house management. We own many restaurants here in Hong Kong, and of course have faced the problems that the world is facing with COVID-19. That has definitely not been an easy time, but Hong Kong luckily has bounced back pretty quickly. The borders are still shut down. It's still 14-day quarantine for anyone coming into Hong Kong, and so that's been a problem. Tourism does not exist at the moment, but I guess locals got fed up with staying home, and they've started to go out, and they've spent. The Hong Kong government is really, and the medical doctors have done a very, very good job in controlling the virus here, because we basically have about 1,065 cases, which about half of them are returnees to Hong Kong from overseas, and luckily we've had that 14-day quarantine, so we've been able to test them as soon as they arrive in the airport. And that's helped in keeping the numbers low. And we've only had 6 deaths. Actually, again, 3 of them were from overseas returnees, and the balance. So really, we've had about 3 deaths. Which the local transmission, and I think it's one of the lowest in the world. And so I really do take my hat off to the government, because they've done an amazing job in keeping it, controlling it. The good news is, the most important thing is everybody does wear a mask. From day one, we had experience from SARS 5 years ago, and everybody learned that the masks do protect you. I think the U.S. is just waking up to the fact. In the past, the doctors were saying, "Oh, no need to wear masks. It's optional." But if you think about it logically, this virus transmits through droplets. And if you are wearing protection, if you are wearing a mask, then you might get some droplets that'll come through, but you'll have less. And so if you do get infected, it's just natural. You'll have a smaller infection, a lighter infection. And so these are things that are very, very important. Also, the social distancing has been another very important. 1.5 meters social distancing, and people really do follow it. And I think that's been one of the reasons that we've been able really to so far overcome it. I mean, everyone's always worried about a second wave, and I worry about the 14-day quarantine. If we take it away, all these people that returned, they would have been in the society. And so I think basically everybody's hoping for a vaccine that will come quickly. Yeah.
Maybe that's your next investment, Allan, into a vaccine. I mean, I'm sure then you could buy the rest of Hong Kong with the return on that investment,
and maybe the rest of the world.
Well, you could almost do that. And at this present time, they would probably give it to you, because the world is really in a spot of bother at the moment, as the English would say. Yes. Businesses that are going through COVID and having trouble opening the doors, and really not that positive towards the future, because they really can't see past the next week. What sort of advice would you give?
I would say that, the important thing is obviously understand if you are open, depending on, U.S. has a whole host of other problems. But in Hong Kong, the important thing is we know that it's local consumption, because there are no tourists at the moment. And so look at what your customers like, what's their habits, how do you make them feel comfortable. I mean, in some of the restaurants that we have buffet on Saturday and Sunday for the food. We now have glass cases that cover the buffet, and then you have staff that, the customer will come and point to what they want, and the staff will then take it out. Everyone, especially in restaurants, all the staff wear masks, and temperatures are taken when guests come in. Tables are still spaced 1.5 meters. So you've got to make people feel safe. I mean, otherwise, if people don't feel safe, they're not going to spend money, and they're not going to come out. That in this environment, it's the virus is really something that is frightening, because it's a health problem. And of course, no one wants to die. Everybody wants to.
We do.
Yeah. And that's the most important thing. So the key is really to make people feel comfortable and to know that your establishment, literally, if you're a retail shop, whatever it is, that people don't feel worried about shopping or coming into a place and suddenly getting infected. That's the worst thing. And so I think these are the only guidelines that you can take. And then, of course, your pricing is a time when many people are suffering. Hong Kong has the highest unemployment that we've ever had at the moment. And so it's really coming up with special deals. Also, if you're in the restaurant business, home delivery suddenly become a very important factor. And so it's catering, re-engineering your product in order so that it's people, let's say if you're a steakhouse, obviously most people are not going to order steak to go, and so it's you might re-engineer to burgers or that kind of thing, so easier to deliver. So you've got to be innovative. You've got to really look at the situation, the problems, who's your customer, what can they afford, and make the sales simple. That's the most important thing. It's got to be a no-brainer.
Look, can you tell me what's happening in Hong Kong? Hong Kong it's getting a bit of a bad rap, but so are many other countries and locations too. But for a place to do business and investment, it was just about the epicenter of the world. Is that mantle slipping?
It's still the same, I can tell you. I mean, obviously, we have a security law that was passed the other night, and basically, that got politically, it's a bad rap against China, but to be quite honest, the majority of the people in Hong Kong are very happy that the security law did come in. If you look around the world, 120 countries have security laws. And so why not Hong Kong? We were supposed to have, after 97, there was something called Article 23, which was our own security law. But 3 years after the handover, when it was supposed to get passed, 500,000 people marched. They were against security law for whatever reason, because the unknown. And finally, what was happening last year is, as everyone around the world witnessed, Hong Kong went through 8 months of protests. Young people, this one country, two systems that was instituted by Deng Xiaoping was a good idea at the time, going up to the one country, two systems, going up to 97. Post 97, what happened was many young people who were not around under the British days, they started feeling that, not trusting China. And the one country, two system was really to know that one country comes first. And then Hong Kong has the right to have two systems, a different system that we had under the British. But for many people, they got nervous and they forgot about one country, and they thought, well, two systems. It's like Australia, for argument's sake, having one of your provinces or states suddenly deciding, that they want a separate system from the mother country, from Australia, and somebody, and then it's fine. But what happens is that they forget that Australia is the mother, and you're just a child, that we've granted you the right to have your own system, and that's exactly what happened. So many people, many young people thought, well, we want to be independent, and so they started to carry signs and had their own song, because social media became very, very dangerous, and there was a lot of interference from behind the scenes. We now find that there's actually an article in the paper today. Some of the foreign countries were funding some of these protesters, sending money to the protests, and they've been named these. Listen, it's a known fact. Some countries around the world, they do fund these kind of things. And so the problem was that the people now, after 8 months, a lot of the protests were not peaceful. A lot of the protests were violent. They started off peaceful, but then you had some young people that were being paid on the front, they call them the front line, after the protest. They would then go and smash up the subway, the MTR, they smash up Starbucks, they smash up Maxine's, which is a cake shop, just things that had relationship to China, because I was being interviewed by many reporters who had friends who were working in the front line. They were getting 8,000 Hong Kong, approximately more than 1,000 Aussie dollars, for going and smashing things up. And so it kind of, and the police at the beginning, we don't have an army. Our army is the PLA. It's not like in the U.S. where you can call the National Guard in, or or other elements. All we had was police that were used to giving parking tickets and not really controlling protests. They had to learn very quickly. They did a very good job in hindsight in looking at the protests in the U.S. Last month. And some of the force that's been used, we got a bad rap because the media that was coming around were blaming the police for using tear gas and other things. And the U.S. even said, "Oh, we will not sell tear gas to Hong Kong." And at the end of the day, you can see they used much worse tear gas plus. And so it becomes political.
That's it for me until Monday. Have a great weekend and be safe and kind. I'm Mike Ryan.